Esta semana, el mundo de la ufología está de luto. No han sido pocos los valientes que se han atrevido a divulgar el fenómeno OVNI desde puestos gubernamentales de gran influencia. Y por supuesto, siempre les ha seguido su respectiva campaña de desprestigio y ridiculización tras atreverse a tan siquiera poner el tema sobre la mesa de debate. El anterior 8 de agosto nos ha dejado Paul Hellyer, una persona que tuvo el valor de afirmar determinadas declaraciones sobre el fenómeno OVNI, así como el tema de la existencia de vida extraterrestre. Pero antes, quiero ponerte en contexto. Sí, en el mundo de la ufología, a veces, hay personas que recurren a la invención, personas de poca seriedad que lucubran sobre el tema sin investigación previa, pero este no es el caso. Para entender la importancia de las declaraciones de Paul Hellyer, es importante saber quién es. Paul Hellyer nació en el 1923 en Ontario, Canadá. Se graduó en la Curtis Wright Institute técnico de aeronáutica en Glendale, California. Paul Hellyer sirvió en el ejército de Canadá, primero como piloto, lo cual le llevó más tarde a servir a la Fuerza Aérea Real Canadiense en la Segunda Guerra Mundial, y también sirvió en la sección de artillería del mismo ejército. Tras su servicio en el ejército canadiense, fue ministro de Defensa Nacional de Canadá. Sirvió en 3 legislaturas gubernamentales, sumando un total de 23 años y medio como miembro del Parlamento. También fue el primer miembro más longevo de la Her Majesty Privy Council, una organización gubernamental no parcial, es decir, no sujeta a ningún partido político, que asesora al ministro de Canadá en asuntos nacionales y de defensa. Una vez puestos en contexto su trayectoria, creo que podemos afirmar que este señor tenía la cabeza lo suficientemente amueblada como para ser considerado de alto respeto en las filas del gobierno canadiense. No era una persona que abriera la boca sin pensar antes en las consecuencias de sus palabras. Entendiendo la envergadura de su papel en la política de su país, así como el nivel de influencia de sus cargos políticos y profesionales, te pido que escuches con atención sus palabras.
My name, as I said, was Paul Hellyer. I'm a former Minister of National Defence for Canada. I served in 3 governments during a total of 23 and a half years as a Member of Parliament. Although as Minister of National Defence, I had sighting reports of UFOs, but about 10 years ago, I started getting interested due to a young man from Ottawa sending me material on the subject. I told him I was too busy to read it, but he had confidence that someday I would. He sent me a copy of Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. And what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on, because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. And so after confirming the contents of the book with a retired United States Air Force general, I accept the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort Mike Bird, to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally. Since then, I've learned a lot from many sources, including a number of the fantastic witnesses that we have heard these last 4 days. They were so outstanding, I was just really blown away with them, the amount of information that was available. But because I'm not a ufologist, I'm a politician, there are only a few things that I want to add in that particular realm. First is that about in the 1960s sometime, it was a flotilla of UFOs headed south that crossed into NATO territory in Europe. And the Commander-in-Chief of the Supreme Allied Headquarters in Europe was naturally very shaken. Fortunately, or maybe divine providence, before the panic button was pushed, the flotilla turned around and headed back north. Obviously, they had thought maybe they were Russian, and they were very concerned about it. Anyway, the investigation was launched into this whole subject, and a document was prepared which concluded that at least 4 species had been visiting Earth for thousands of years. And this is my own view at this stage as well. So, except for that, there are just a couple of things that we've talked about that I'd like to refer to. And one was that we were referring to them as they until this morning when Linda Moulton Howe, I think she was the first one, actually named 3 different species. I have brought my latest book called Light at the End of the Tunnel, A Survival Plan for the Human Species, as an aide-memoir, and I name 5 different species here. I'm aware of more now. As a matter of fact, I saw a document just a few days ago that mentioned 20. And I think you, Mr. Chairman, were interested in some of the places they might come from. And I have in here Zeta reticuli, R-E-T-I-C-U-L-I, reticuli, the Pleiades, Orion, Andromeda, and the Altair star systems. So I don't think we can any more refer to them as they, because they're not an amorphous mass. They are different species and consequently may have different agendas. I don't think we can say that they all have the same agenda any more than we could say that the United States, China, and Russia had the same agenda. Our real interests may be very similar, but as of now, our perceived interests are still quite far apart. One more observation before I begin what I want to say, and that is that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the 66-year-old cadavers. And I was glad to have Linda this morning finally say that there are live ETs on Earth at this present time, and at least 2 of them probably working with the United States government. The other species that I learned about not too long ago was called the tall whites. And this is when Paula Harris broke the story just a few years ago. And through her good offices, I had the chance to talk for about 3 hours with former Airman Charles Hall and listen to this absolutely fascinating story of how he was working with, first of all, he was scared out of his skin, but after that, when he got to know them, how he was working with, and finally they became to trust each other and have a good working relationship with the tall whites at the gunnery range at Indian Springs in Nevada. And these tall whites were living on United States Air Force property and working in cooperation with the United States Air Force and sharing technology with them. He wrote a book, incidentally, called Millennial Hospitality. There are 4 different versions, but Paula says that Millennial Hospitality number 2 is the best. I think that's the one I read, and it's a very interesting read if you want to sort of get inside the problem of what it's like to bump into these people floating across the terrain in the desert. Enough on that for now. My interest is in full disclosure. And I just, my only caveat is I think probably I would say 95 to 98% full disclosure. I know of 1 or 2 things that I'm not sure should be in the public domain, at least yet. There will be someday, I'm sure, but not maybe immediately. But just as children survive but that could be a necessary step in our.
Pero estas declaraciones no lo son todo. En una entrevista con él en el 2014, Hellier dijo que al menos 4 especies extraterrestres han estado visitando la Tierra durante miles de años, y la mayoría de ellos provienen de otros sistemas solares, aunque hay algunos que viven en Venus, Marte y la Luna de Saturno, según él. Palabras de él mismo: no creen que seamos buenos administradores de nuestro planeta. Paul Hellier era un estricto defensor de que el espacio exterior no debía ser militarizado por ningún país, y este punto de vista es algo muy notorio viniendo de una persona que ha estado en un ministerio de defensa. Esto no lo dice alguien cualquiera. Él no es el único político que se ha atrevido a ir en contra de la corriente de lo políticamente correcto y ha divulgado estos menesteres de una forma totalmente profesional. Él fue uno de los varios, pero nunca demasiados. Siempre se necesitarán personas con el valor suficiente para decirle al mundo que existen cosas más allá de los noticieros de la más media. Y Paul Hellier ayudó en este menester. Por eso debemos de agradecerle la valentía de personas como él que decidieron compartir la verdad. Descansa en paz, Paul. Nunca olvidaremos tu legado. Si te ha gustado el vídeo, no olvides darle like, compartirlo y suscribirte, ya que me ayudas muchísimo a seguir haciendo contenido para YouTube. Un abrazo y hasta la próxima.